Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you all here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. So we're here with the live stream that I do on Sunday nights called Into the Progverse. And we're following I guess we've been doing this now for 4 or 5 weeks, where we are following a stream that I started in 1970. So we did 1970, 71, 72, skipped 73 because I'm doing a monthly series, and did last week we did 1974, and we're now doing 1975. These are all prog albums that were released in that year. So that's the theme of tonight's video. I hope that you will find something of interest here to you. So this is the 1 year that we've done so far that I actually have more albums I want than I actually have. So I only have 10 albums that I think qualify for this year. However, they're all really good. Like, this is not so much by quantity as by quality of albums this time around. So a lot of really good albums. Progressive albums came out in 1975. And then I also have a list of albums that I have been trying to get, which is almost as long or longer, actually, than the albums I do have. Lots of really good stuff here from this year. I included a couple of albums for which I did not include the band's debut album because I don't really think of it as a prog album. Now, sometimes these lists, when I'm looking for these things, they will put them in as prog albums, but really they're not. So you can't really include something that isn't that. I'm just going to move my stack here so it's not going to get knocked over when I go through. I tried to get as many albums on the list to talk about as I can. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I did not include here that I could have included, but I don't know enough about it, and it has not been something I've pursued. So I don't want to go on about something I don't really have a lot of info about. But anyways, I'm here to talk about the ones I do have for the year 1975, and put my glasses on now. And here we go. We're going to start. So these are actually probably in reverse alphabetical order, but maybe not. I think they're just kind of mixed up. They're not in any particular order. We're not ranking them. We're just talking about them. So the first album on this list today, I think this definitely has a prog element to it, but I wouldn't call this a prog album. To me, it's kind of a pop album with some prog and some, maybe a little blues part to it, and maybe even a little psychedelia, but I don't think the psychedelia part is dominant for sure. So we're talking about Supertramp's Crisis, What Crisis, and I love this cover. It's one of my favorite covers. Guys out there sunning a little mat in the middle of a destruction zone. It's absolutely preposterous, but great. So lots of good stuff on this album. To me, Supertramp had those 4 albums in the middle of their discography that were all like just class A albums, right? Like just almost masterpieces, all of them. This one, maybe the least of the 4, but still really good album. Nice picture here on the back of them lying at the beach. Doesn't look anything like this, that's for sure. So you've got Sister Moonshine's on here. Fantastic tune. One of their best tunes, I think. Another Man's Woman. This one's really good too. I kind of like this song quite a bit. Lady, Poor Boy, The Meaning, Just a Normal Day. These are all really good stuff. So there's no, other than Sister Moonshine, I don't think there's anything on here that's really super well known, but it's just a really strong album. To me, this is very similar to Rush's Caress of Steel in that it's as strong as the other albums, but it doesn't really get the notoriety that it deserves. So it's nice to give it a chance today. I like this. And of course, you're featuring Roger Hodgson on vocals, keyboards, and guitars. Bob Bemberg on drums and percussion, Dougie Thompson on bass, John Anthony Helliwell on wind instruments and vocals, and Richard Davis or Ricky Davis on vocals and keyboards. So to me, that's the classic band for Supertramp. One of 4 super albums. Yes, I think their debut album is quite good too. I like it a lot, and maybe the album after Breakfast in America is decent as well. Some of the stuff in the 80s is quite good. It's a lot more progressive than a lot of these other albums, but I think most people generally see these 4 albums in the middle as being Supertramp at its peak. So yeah, that's the first album we're talking about tonight, Supertramp's Crisis. What Crisis? Next up, this is a absolute masterpiece. It's an argument whether this is progressive rock album or not. It definitely has a lot of different elements to it. We're talking about Queen's A Night at the Opera. Did I get the right one? I did. Night at the Opera. Sometimes I think that it's Day at the Races I'm looking for, but it's actually Night at the Opera. This one has a lot of different sounds to it. You've got some hard rock here. You've got some vaudeville here. You've got some almost classical bits here. You've got some, a little bit of prog here as well, and some pop and some almost ballad-like stuff as well. So it's got everything. It's a real mishmash album, but has a lot of different stuff in it. So the very mishmash nature of it kind of lends itself a bit to the prog element. Lazing on a Sunday afternoon, classic stuff. And then you've got some of Freddie Mercury's absolute super vocal style, just an amazing vocalist. This was produced by Roy Thomas Baker as well. I like Seaside Rendezvous, another kind of quirky song like Lazy Sunday Afternoon. You're My Best Friend. This is a pop super song. I Am in Love with My Car and Death on Two Legs are very heavier songs, not songs that at this stage you would think might not be on this album. They don't really sound as much the same as the rest, but this is, like I said, a rhapsody of albums. And of course, Bohemian Rhapsody's on here, one of the very classic and most well-known Queen songs, one of the big rock songs actually of the 1970s. Fantastic tune. And Love of My Life, this one's great vocal harmony, just a great vocal job by Freddie Mercury, as it is on most of the tracks on here. Yeah, so Queen's A Night at the Opera, one of the 2 Marx Brother film titles that they used, Day at the Races being the other one. This is just a really solid album. Whether you consider this prog or not, yeah, you can make arguments for both, I think. For today, I made an argument to put it in just because I wanted to, and so it's here. Next album up is definitely a prog album. This is the first solo album by this artist. And he did very well out of the gate. This is Steve Hackett's Voyage of the Acolyte. Some really strong stuff on here. Stuff that, some of this stuff, Shadow of the Hierophant and maybe Ace of Wands, a couple other tracks on here, could have easily been on Genesis albums and would have fit in. The album cover is quite Genesis-like and definitely prog-like. And there's just a lot of really good stuff here. And of course, you've got a couple other members of Genesis on this album with Michael Rutherford and Phil Collins. Phil Collins actually doing some vocals on this album too, but different sounding. His vocals are very different sounding here. They're not as much like that screaming part that he started taking to later later in his singing career. He started becoming more like that as things went along. But this is a strong album. The Tower Struck Down. Both the Hands of the Priestess Part 1 and 2 are good. Ace of Wands is a great opener for this album. And the Sisters of Sirius I like. But Shadow of the Hierophant is probably the big track on this album. Definitely, If it had been on one of the Genesis albums, it would have been a masterpiece. But on this album, it's just a masterpiece. Yeah, so anyway, Steve Hackett's Voyage of the Acolyte from 1975. Next up, this is an album I've only just began to explore. I love the colors of this album. I love the feel of this album. I don't know really much about the band, but I have I went on a whim to buy the album and I liked it immediately, and now I want to get into more of their stuff. Talking about Barclay James Harvest, BHJ as they're sometimes called. This is a nice cover to the album, and the actual backside is quite good too. So you've got one that's more of a summer look to the album cover, and then one that's more of a kind of autumn, maybe an autumn look to the album cover. But some great tracks on here. A lot of this stuff still getting into, but I like the guy's vocal parts. I like the sound of the album. So it's getting a lot of time with me. I will probably get a lot more as the time goes along. Barclay James Harvest, The Honored Ghosts is the name of the album. Next up, this is an album, of course, that is among my favorite albums, probably a top 20 album for me, maybe even higher. Rush's Caress of Steel. Kind of the beginning of serious prog for Rush up until this point. They had a little bit of prog on their previous album. This one's full on prog. Lots of heavy stuff on here as well. There's almost like the beginning of that proto kind of progressive metal albums that came out by a lot of groups later. This one in 2112 kind of launching that. 2112 probably more well known, but this one definitely has some of that element to it. Other than I Think I'm Going Bald, the rest of the tracks are absolutely great. I love all the tracks on here. Lakeside Park, well, not a prog album, is probably my favorite song by Rush, period. The Necromancer and the Fountain of Lamneth. Sorry. Really good, early, progressive, epic length songs by Rush. The beginning of that era of those epic length songs. The Fountain of Lamneth on one side. Just absolutely love this particular song. It's probably my favorite of their epic length songs. However, the Necromancer, pretty kind of a heavy, darker feel to it, but lots of stuff here. And the reason I like this song so much too is because it kind of reminds me of the Toronto area that I lived in as a teenager, and this particular track talks about that particular area of town. So so it's kind of captured me that way too. So a much darker album, heavier album, and not really all that different from 2112, except for maybe not as commercial as that. But still, both, to me, there's not a lot of difference between the two. Rush's Caress of Steel. So next up, this album, of course, is going to be on this list. Wish You Were Here. Some people consider this Pink Floyd's best album. I can't argue with it. It's got every song on here is a masterpiece. My two favorite, Welcome to the Machine and Wish You Were Here, both really great. And the two Shine On You Crazy Diamond parts 1 and 2, really good as well. Even as Have a Cigar is really good. So most of the tracks on this album, this is kind of a strange album for me. I don't think alternative rock does fall into that category. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't think so, though. To me, prog rock is prog rock. You've got basically progressive rock and prog rock, which are kind of the same. Progressive rock to me means the albums are moving forward and progressing, where prog rock, they have that progressive sound to them, but don't necessarily move forward from album to album. That's just my own feeling about it. So welcome to the channel anyways, Buffalo Billy. Hopefully I can tell you something that will be of interest to you. So this particular album, all 5 of the tracks on here, I came to individually. So as my musical career went along and I listened to music on the radio, I became to know all 5 of these tracks. I did not know that they were all on the same album. So when I bought the album, there was nothing new on here. It was all already stuff I'd listened to for years. So Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd, fantastic album. I believe this is their 9th studio album. Next album up is one of my favorites by this band. I'm not sure. I don't really think of the term alternative rock much, so I can't really tell you much about what that means. To me, that's more of a general phrase. Maybe it includes all rock music. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. I don't really. It's not a term I think much about. So, and shoegaze, I don't even know that term. Did I miss something somewhere? I don't know that term, so I can't answer those questions for you. This is Jethro Tull's Minstrel in the Gallery. So to me, Jethro Tull is kind of a folk rock blues band with a lot of progressive elements to their music. This particular album, very progressive. By this time, they were full-on progressive stuff. No, I think if you're asking me if that's what I think it is, yes, that's what I think progressive rock is music that constantly gets more progressive and adds a lot more elements to the music as it goes along. Prog rock is often considered progressive rock, but many albums are just similar, like they're just repeats of each previous album. So they don't really progress, but they have that prog sound to it, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure what you're asking me. So by your point, you think rock stops. No, I don't know what you mean by that, so I can't answer that either. So anyways, Minstrel in the Gallery. This one has a lot of Jethro Tull's really strong songs that I've come to love. You've got the opening track, Minstrel in the Gallery, and Cold Winds of Valhalla, very strong songs for them. Black Satin Dancer is kind of a bluesy kind of, I would say almost folky song with a lot of pop elements to it, but definitely really good. And then, of course, the big song on this album is Baker Street Muse, which is just a full-on guitar, drums, everything that you would want in a prog song here. Grace, which finished off the album, is quite good too. This particular album, though, has quite a good amount of bonus stuff on it. I guess I'm not sure what shoegaze means. I've never heard that term before. This is a new term to me, so I don't know what it means. You may be right. It might be a offshoot of progressive rock or just another way of saying progressive rock. I don't really know. It's not a term. I can look it up. In fact, we will, because I don't know that term. Never heard it before. This is the first time I've ever heard it. Shoegaze. I don't even know if I've heard it referred to to anything. Yeah, they say it's a subgenre of indie and alternative rock. So I'm not an indie rock type of guy. I don't really listen to a lot of indie rock. So it's not a phrase that I'm familiar with for that reason. Sonic Youth, I do not know. Smashing Pumpkins, no, I would not say they're progressive rock at all. And I don't listen to them. So can't tell you much about their music other than it's not something that I listen to. I never go that way. It could be an offshoot. It's possible. Like New Wave was back in the early 80s, late 70s. People started going off into New Wave, which was considered a bit of an offshoot from progressive rock because progressive rock was probably at its end at that point before it made a comeback. Yes. Okay. In that case, yeah, they are similar that way. They moved away from mainstream rock into their own subgenres. Yes, most of progressive rock, most of it comes from the classical rock genre. So that classical rock or classical music was where a lot of progressive rock got its roots in. And then further, same with jazz. As jazz went along, jazz started to have an impact on progressive rock too, almost to the point where a lot of stuff was kind of came to a almost jazz fusion or a fusion element to the music. And there, to me, there's a bit of a distinction between the two, between fusion and progressive rock. So for me, progressive rock is rooted in classical rock and is rock music that's a little different than the mainstream rock, where fusion is more jazz influence, but definitely has that progressive element to the music. There's no doubt about that. I'm not a huge fan of fusion. Some fusion, a little bit of fusion in the music, I'm okay with. Full on jazz fusion, I don't really listen to much. So that's just the way it is for me. And welcome to the show, Ben. Nice to see you. Yeah, the problem with progressive rock is that you may start out as a progressive rock band producing an album, and then you add different stuff on the next album, and it gets to a point where it's almost at its maximum progressiveness. And then after that, it's really not progressing anymore. It's just repeating the same kind of music that they had been doing prior to that. And so the term prog is kind of stuck where it has that progressive sound to it, but it may not actually be progressing at all, Hence the word prog, which is just a short for progressive, but at the same time, it's kind of taken on, it's kind of, what's the word they do? Migrated, the word's kind of migrated to a different spot. Yes, exactly. That's a good example, Ben. Soft Machines bundles. I don't really consider that progressive, but it definitely has that element to it, but it might be more of a fusion album. Anyways, this album, great album. If you haven't got a chance to listen to it, has a lot of progressive elements to it. But again, maybe it's a little more prog than progressive. I don't know. You tell me. Next album up, this is one of the most progressive rock bands out there, Gentle Giant, always moving the needle forward on just about every album they do. And hence, to me, these are a prime, pure example of progressive rock at its best, where every album they add new instruments because they can, because they have that ability. They're all multi-instrumentalists, moving the album forward in different directions with different styles and combining different stuff. This, to me, is full-on progression right here. Gentle Giant's Freehand. Some really good stuff on here, just the same. Fantastic tune. Most of the stuff on here is really good. Time to Kill. This album featuring Derek and Ray Shulman, Kerry Minier, Gary Green, and John Weathers. Fantastic album. I highly recommend it. Yes, I can see why they would be your favorite progressive prog band. They just, nobody does the intricacies and have so many different instruments and so many different sounds incorporated into their music and constantly evolving the envelope. It's just, nobody does that. And hence the reason why they're probably now a top 15 or so band for me, and they may end up in the top 10. It initially stopped for me in the 70s, like so many other people, but with the onset or the come on or the beginning of Marillion started to wind the thing up again, maybe different. So the second wave of progressive rock, which started in the 1980s, and this is where you get that neo-prog or the prog element coming into play, because at this point, nothing could be done that was different than anything that had been done before. all they could do was kind of repeat and change it around a bit, maybe add elements from all the bands together, making that more progressive, but definitely has a prog element to it. And that's just my opinion. It never really stops for me. There's still people out there producing really good prog stuff. Um, there's still a few bands that are pushing the needle a bit when you're adding stuff in there that you've never heard in a element of progressive rock before, but it's very difficult when everybody's explored every avenue as you go along. Next up is another Camel album. I did a Camel album recently. This one to me, progressive in nature for sure. Lots of progressive elements here. No vocals though. It's because of that, it hasn't done as well with me as maybe it would if it had some vocals. I'm a vocal guy. I like vocal music, and when I think of progressive rock, vocal music is also progressive with it. So when there's no vocals on it, to me, it kind of reduces itself to an instrumental album, of course, but also maybe a little bit more jazz fusion-y, although this one I don't think of as jazz fusion. It definitely has more of a classical feel to it than a jazz feel to it. But it's really a pretty strong album from top to bottom. For many people, this is one of their favorite albums by this band. This is Camel's The Snow Goose, in case I did not say that, which I don't think I did. I don't know if it fell backwards. It just became different. The bands that were playing it in the 80s, the IQs and Marillions and Palace and Pendragon and North Star and all those bands that began to play that music in the 80s started adding that symphonic element to the music, which wasn't as much present in the 70s stuff, which was more classical oriented and more a lot of folky stuff in their music, as well as a lot of different elements. But with the onset of that new kind of use of keyboards and synthesizers and more modern instruments began to move, kind of moving in a little bit of a different direction, but also infusing a lot of the previous bands' musics together. You're going to find many of the more, at least in the 80s, a lot of those bands fused Yes and Genesis together, the sounds of both groups together, and then also added symphonic elements to the music, which wasn't present earlier on. And I think that is different. It's progressing the movement further ahead, but maybe not at the rapid rate that you got early in the 70s. Now, this album, which is the last one I'm going to be talking about from my list, is the Fly By Night album. Definitely has prog elements to it, a lot of hard rock elements to it, maybe some poppy stuff on this album. So this album has a lot of elements to it. I really don't think of this album as a progressive rock album, other than I love the cover. I think of this more as a hard rock album with different elements to it, with some pop, prog, maybe classical bits to it as well. But at my first thought of this album is as a hard rock album, not as a progressive rock album, but still pretty strong. It does have a couple of notable progressive songs on here, Bytor and the Snow Dog and Anthem. So these two songs going forward. So when I think of Rush, I think of the debut album as being a bit of a hard rock album, pure hard rock. Then they take that element. Sorry, I'm running out of water. They take that element on that next album, this album, their second album, when they get a real strong drummer who also can write lyrics, and they start producing more progressive stuff, and also move into the radio-friendly poppy area, as well as doing some more softer work as well. And this album, if we're doing a natural progression, this would move past the next album. Well, the next album became much more progressive, but also had was a lot heavier, and then moved right into a more heavier but more progressive as well with 2112 before they became full on progressive rock with the with the Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres at the next couple of albums. So constantly changing their style was to me very progressive in its own right. But those are my stack of 10 albums. I'll give them to you back. And then I'm going to talk about some albums that I would like to get because I think they fit well within my yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Ben. You'll come to your senses one day. So the album, I'll give you these albums, and then I'll talk about some of the albums I would like to have, which I think fit well within my wheelhouse. Fly By Night, Rush, Camels, The Snow Goose, Gentle Giants, Free Hand, Jethro Tull's Minstrels and the Gallery, Wish You Were Here from Pink Floyd, Rush's Caress of Steel, Barclay James Harvest. This is the time-honored Ghosts, Voyage of the Acolyte from Steve Hackett, Queens and Night at the Opera. Oh, sorry, A Night at the Opera. Yeah, Night at the Opera. I wanted to say the other one. And then Crisis, What Crisis from Supertramp. All of them, to me, have a lot of progressive elements, all really strong albums. Yeah, you can't get 20 of your favorite bands into a top 10, that's for sure. I completely understand that. Gentle Giant is along with Judas Priest. And, well, those two bands are probably going to be in my top 10 before long. Well, maybe not top 10, but they'll be in my elite group, which is now expanded by one more band, Iron Maiden. I've officially decided that they deserve to be in that category now. I'm making no longer a group of 9, but a group of 10. And I actually think, if I'm being honest, I would think that Iron Maiden for me is a bigger band for me than Pink Floyd, which is saying a lot since Pink Floyd is a big band for me. So now we're going to talk about some of these other prog albums, bands, jazz fusion stuff too, that I think is important to have for me. All of these albums, if I can, by the end of this year coming, I'd like to own them all. So the first one is Soft Machines Bundles, which you mentioned earlier. I don't know much about this album. I did like their debut album quite a bit, and I think this album has some similarities to that. Now, many people say their first 3 albums are progressive in nature, and then they are not progressive in nature after that. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far with them. Tangerine Dreams, Rubicon. So I like most of the Tangerine Dream albums. The 3 I own, I like a lot. So I'm expecting that this one is a well-known one, and I'll probably like this quite a bit as well. Rick Wakeman's The Myth and Legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. This has long been an album I've wanted to have. I have his King Henry VIII and Six Wives of King Henry VIII and The Journey to the Center of the Center of the Earth, which I like quite a bit. Both of them are really good. So this one I think fits in that wheelhouse quite well. Steve Hillage's Fish Rising. I like this album. It's at first I didn't. It wasn't really within my wheelhouse, but the more I've listened to it, or the odd time I've had a chance to listen to it, it's really kind of piqued me into wanting to have it. Anything by Caravan after the Land of Gray and Pink has now become fully outwardly sought after by me, including this album, which is called Cunning Stunts, and we won't get into really what they're trying to get at here. Yeah, they're like Hawkwind that way, and Eloy, all 3 of them very repetitive, but good repetition. I like the sound that they make. So when they do that, Hawkwind especially gifted at this particular thing. They're true to their sound, and their sound is pretty damn good. Eloy, all of the Eloy albums, just I used to think they just were so repetitive, but they've got a lot of different sounds to their music that they add for each album is a little bit different with something different to it that I quite like. I've got 3 of them in my playlist right now, which is probably the maximum I would put for any band in my playlist, but they're just all really good stuff. The next one is Renaissance. I can never say this name, Shahara Sad and the Other Stories. But it doesn't really matter. I like the Renaissance stuff has really come on for me. I've acquired a taste for it now, and now I want to listen to it, kind of like the way Gentle Giant was. But with Renaissance, I never really owned an album, so it's kind of a new thing for me. Always here, really good. Next up is a band that I liked initially when I was young, and then I just didn't like. And now they kind of it's kind of loosened up, so I neither like or dislike them. But I've become a little bit open-minded about them, and that's ELO, Face the Music. Some of their stuff, probably some of their early stuff, I will like quite a bit. I never liked that kind of late 70s stuff by them. It sounded almost disco-y or poppy to me, and maybe the negative feeling I have about it has kind of passed a bit, so I'm kind of a bit indifferent to them. Mike Oldfield, I do like the 2 I have, and now I want more. Omadon is the one that we're talking about for this year. Mike Oldfield's Omadon. I think this is this his second album? I think it is. I didn't look it up. I guess I'm gonna look it up and see what it is. Yeah, some people really like the people that like. I find with ELO, the people that like them have them on the top shelf, and the ones that don't like them don't even think about them. And I tend to be in that category, but it's changing. And what usually happens with me, and at least I've discovered this happening with me, is that I got to start this all over again because it's all messed up. What usually happens with me is that I'll start to like one particular band, and then the next thing, other bands that have something similar to them will then get exposed to me. That's normally what happens. Like even this guy, like Mike Oldfield, I never really thought much of him, but somebody told me, "Oh, if you like this, you'll like that." So because I like that, I started following him, and now I kind of like him more than the original band. I can't even remember who it was. So we're going to go down here, and that's not what I wanted. You'll have to excuse me. That wasn't supposed to happen. So what I really wanted to do here was find out when this Omadon was in his discography. I think it was like his second album. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that's what I think. And it's not going to give me that opening. So let's try it again. You gotta love computers, eh? They anticipate things that you're not asking for. Happens a lot. Okay, here we go. Now I can get into there. I just wanted to find out while I'm looking at it if this is actually the case with this. And now I'm not getting the full stretch here. Jesus Christ. There it is. That's what we wanted. Computers are supposed to be helpful, aren't they? Yeah, Omadon. No, I'm wrong there. So actually, Omadon is the third album by him. But I'd like to have this one, definitely. Next one up is Chris Squire, Fish Out of Water. Many people think this is a masterpiece album. I owned this originally on cassette. A guy that I worked with who was a classical guitar player, very big into Yes as well. He made this album for me. He from his collection, so he took the Fish Out of Water and recorded it on cassette and gave it to me with it in stylized writing on all the songs because he was good at that. And I kept that, and I still may have it somewhere, but I haven't found it I haven't looked for it for a while. It could be in my cassette. There's not many cassettes left, maybe 3 or 4. But anyways, This one's definitely a progressive rock album, Chris Squire. I would like to get it again, like to add it. Now, I could have put Steve Howe's Beginnings in there too, which is one of my favorite Steve Howe albums, his debut album, but I don't really think of it as a progressive rock album. To me, this is a collection of really different kind of acoustic guitar and electric guitar sounds. It would have been a better album if Steve had decided not to sing, but he didn't. Omega, I don't know this. I've heard this group. I haven't, but I don't know the album. So that's why I put Chris Squire on here, but I didn't put Steve Howe in here. Beggar's Opera is a band that I like. I've ever since they were in one of the Battle of the Bands, I've been looking for their stuff, but have yet to find any. Curved Air is another band from the Battle of the Bands who I've grown to like quite a bit. Midnight Wire is the album here. The Beggar's Opera one is Beggars Can't Be Choosers. Both those albums came out in 75. Very strong, I think, albums. And then Griffin's Rain Dance. I like all of the Griffin stuff. There's a band that progressed from a very much classical medieval sound, not even rock really, to become very progressive with a lot of instruments. And they use a lot of different instruments that you don't traditionally hear in rock music, and very few bands actually can play or even attempt to play. Yeah, very good. So, yeah, I did say Jethro Tull. I put Minstrels in the Gallery, which is one of the albums that is here on my one of my favorite Jethro Tull albums, probably a top 3 or 4 for me, maybe a top 2. I think it's probably a top 2 for me. Only Songs from the Wood do I probably like more than this, so I would think only Songs from the Wood, Minstrels in the Gallery, and probably Act Along would be my 3 favorite. With maybe the 2 newer ones for me, Stormwatch and Broadsword and the Beast, might round out my top 5 favorite Jethro Tull albums. Of course, you also have Stand Up, which I also like quite a bit. Spartacus, that was a band on the list that I didn't know much about. Triumphant, pretty good. I've heard of them, Spartacus, but I've not listened to them. Now, another band that people always suggest to me is Colosseum, but I've listened to Colosseum on a couple of occasions, and I find them too far to the jazz fusion style. The problem that I have with jazz fusion, in case people don't understand what my issue is with them, is they tend to go a little bit too jammy for me. And that's what the biggest issue is. It's one of the reasons why there's some bands I just don't listen to, not because I dislike the band. I just don't like all the jamminess to it. And The Journey self-titled wasn't an album I looked up. Probably could have thrown that in here too, because I think is it from 75 as well? I think it might be. Could have thrown that in. I don't mind this album. It's not one of my favorite. I'm not a huge Journey fan. To me, Journey, some people say, well, they're very similar to Foreigner. I don't see it. I don't really see it. Foreigner was a band I loved a lot when I was younger. Maybe it would have been the same with Journey if I had gone there, but I never went there because I never really liked the sound of their music. The problem with them is sometimes the very thing that makes them popular is the very thing that makes you not like them. They had a lot of poppy stuff on the radio, and I found it to be, yeah, you're right. It's a debut album. Probably should have been mentioned here. I do own it, so we will mention it here because I completely slipped my mind with that, but it definitely belongs on this list today. So probably should have thrown that in there for those of you who don't know. Journey's first album, definitely progressive. Actually, their first couple, I think, are progressive. The third one, yeah, it could fit in there, but I don't know that it did. Yeah, I don't think this guy liked me much, by the way. I think he was just trolling me a bit, wanted to try and expose me. And so this is a guy who likes showing his CDs for views and needs to feel accepted. I guess that's what he feels that I need to do. But I'm not doing it for that reason. I don't need to be accepted by anybody. I'm doing that because I like talking about progressive rock. I like talking about music. That's what I'm into. If you got a problem with that, then just stay off the channel. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And I think that's where he was going with this the whole time. I kind of suspected that he was trolling me a bit, but um, I'll always give people the benefit of the doubt. And anyways, it makes no difference to me. He's gone now. He's off the station and not watching, so I'm okay with that. And he's probably okay with it too, so that works out. So those are all of the albums that I both own and would like to own. I'm sure there's people out there that have albums that they want to throw in there for mentioning, as Ben did. He threw in the Spartacus and the Journey albums. The Journey album should have been on here to begin with, but for some reason I slipped up on that one. I forgot about it. Yeah, excellent group of albums from 1975. So we've done now 3 straight years now where I think it's progressively got better. So fits the tune, right? From 73, 70, well, we didn't do 73. We did 72, 74, 75. I probably should have done 73 too. I may go back and do it once my monthly series is over. But I didn't want to do it while I was in the middle of that because it might kind of give away some things on the show that I didn't want to at that point. Anyways, I hope that people enjoyed this episode. So I had decided that this was going to be the last episode that we were going to do for progressive rock, but I think there's been enough interest in the series. People seem to be interested in talking about this era of progressive rock, the original era of progressive rock. So we can stretch it out for a couple more years. We'll do 76 and 77. So next week we'll be doing 76. And if I get through those two and I still think there's enough interest in the series, I may do 78 and 79, but we'll leave that for now. We'll just go with the ones that we're doing at the present. Anyways, thank you all for coming on the show tonight. It was a pleasure to have you, and it was nice to actually get some conversation in about this music that we like so much, and to get to talk about albums that are popular with me and usually popular with quite a few people. So anyways, I hope to see you all again very soon. Well, next week we will be doing 1976 to continue with this progressive rock stuff. Anyways, I'm glad I was able to help a couple people tonight. That's all that really matters. And also get to talk about stuff that I like and I know you guys like too. So anyways, we'll be back next Sunday night into the Progverse, where we'll be talking about the year 1976 and the albums that came out that year. And I'll continue with this for probably at least 2 more weeks. And then we'll see what happens. Maybe we got to go on to a different topic, or maybe we'll do 78 and 79 as well. Anyways, hope to see you all then. Take care. Have yourself a good evening. And thanks for coming tonight. Goodbye here from the Prog Monster.